Last but not least this morning, Martin James, Commercial Director of Didac. So with a degree in production engineering and an MBA, Martin progressed through the ranks to be Managing Director of Rye Machinery. In 1997 he co-founded Didac, initially focused on woodworking machine training, but now covering the full range of furniture woodworking training. Didac has delivered funded apprenticeship training since 1999. I know from personal experience that Didac's a particularly proactive training provider out there, and is always willing and able to look at new ideas and helping bring things through, as evidenced by Martin being here today. So to finish off this morning, in particular, Martin's going to talk about whether we need, as an industry, to look at establishing an apprenticeship training agency. Here's a secret: the answer is yes. But Martin.
Good morning, everybody. Just to sort of complete the sort of introduction about Didac, we are a commercial private training provider, and our strategy since the beginning has always been a balance between private commercial training and funded training. And currently we're about 55% in favour of commercial training. And just to give you an idea of scale, in the last 12 months we've trained 1,800 people on short courses on woodworking machine training. But we have a whole variety of other sectors in which we train as well. Back in 2011 we took over the Builders Merchants Federation apprenticeship scheme. The training providers in the room will recall everybody was under pressure with minimum contract values. The Builders Merchants Federation scheme was going to fail because it fell below the minimum contract value. We stepped in, combined it with our contract, and we've sustained the programme ever since. And it's that experience of working with the Builders Merchants Federation that brought us into contact with the Electrical Distributors Association. And it's the case study on their experience that I want to take you through, because I think it is a real template for the future. And quite a few of the questions or probes in previous speakers, I'm hoping that what I'm going to talk through will become a template, or could become a template, for solving some of our issues as an industry. Just to step back a little, these were some of the headlines in the Mind the Gap report in 2015, which Pete Beale presented back in October 2015, and these were the headlines. And the key thing, or one of the key things, was that employers found it very difficult to find apprentices, apprenticeships, and to actually get the whole thing together so that they could succeed. But the one that really struck at me was, particularly for the manufacturers, almost half the manufacturers feel that their businesses are unattractive to youngsters. And that really, in a way, that hurt, because the furniture industry has been my home since I got into it in 1977. And I actually couldn't understand why that was, because people like to do craft, they like to make things. And I've set that against the growth success of the builders, merchants and the electrical distributors in their apprenticeship programs. So and I look at the builders merchant trade. I know it's a big part of my business, and I hope you've got to keep this quiet, but what's the builders merchants trade got that we haven't got? And I really feel strongly about that. So, just to move on, what's an ATA? It's an apprentice training agency, and in essence, it's a regulated company that employs apprentices on behalf of employers. So, as you can see in the diagram, it employs the learner, it handles the payroll, and it handles the administration. The apprentice works full-time in the host employer, okay? And the host employer provides the knowledge and the practical skills, practical experience, and the ATA organisers engage with the training provider, and the training provider then goes into the employer setting to deliver the training and the assessment. So that's effectively what it is. And ATAs are very highly regulated, and they've been around for quite some time. And in the UK, or in England, and I'm sorry this is slightly England-centric on this list, there are currently 69, or there were this time yesterday, ATAs listed on the .gov website, and you'll see number 19 in the list is EDA Learning and Development, which is the ATA I'm talking about. But the key issue there is that a lot of organisations have clicked that the ATAs could be a solution to some of the funding issues and structural issues that many, many sectors had. And I understand there are another 200 ATAs now in the pipeline. So this is a current and serious issue for the furniture sector to be looking at. Growth in EDA apprentice starts. Now originally, as you can see, the orange column is the apprenticeship starts, the blue column is the expressions of interest. And over the 4 years to 2016, from basically a standing start in December 12, you can see there's very, very significant growth. And with the expressions of interest, you can see, if you can do the maths on the scale, they have actually increased their penetration into the sector. So by any measure, I would say that that's been a success story. And that's attracting youngsters into electrical distributors, and what they've managed to do is stitch together basically the whole of the UK industry. So I think that's a success story that if we can replicate in the furnishing sector, we actually have a way forwards. How did they do it? Well, structurally at the heart of it is the ATA. But for me, it's all about the other services that you can see there. And when I go back and think about the comment in the report about lack of confidence in the industry, I'm thinking, I don't actually believe that. I think that's just how we're articulating the problem. Because I believe there are a lot of people out there who would actually love a career in the furnishing sector. You've got a whole range of craft apprenticeship, so hand skills, bench skills, high-tech skills, and you can migrate all the way through to commercial and senior management skills. I just won't accept that we're not in a sector that's attractive. So, recruitment is key. And the ATA, one of the central activities of the EDA Learning Development is to have an apprentice recruitment service. They only target apprentices. They also provide information, advice and guidance and connections for employers. Another one of the comments that came out of the report was a lack of connectivity. We're a highly fragmented sector. We've got a lot of specialisms, a lot of different craft areas, a lot of different technical areas. We're represented by multiple trade associations. So we need something that draws us all together, not just to meet at conference and to talk, but actually every day we need somebody to wake up and think, I've got to place another 10 apprentices this week in the furnishing sector. And I think this is a template that will enable us to do that. Matching service, connecting employers with learners. So we can, for example, we've got the Make It Furniture programme. So this can be a next step beyond Make It Furniture to make connections with employers. HR payroll, monitoring. Monitoring is very important. The EDA, they are very tough with their training providers. And they are on your case. And I think that's important. I may not like it always as a training provider, but then I usually look at it and say, yeah, we fell over there, So we need to be on our mettle. Syndicate of training providers. Now, with that number of apprentices around the country, and they've got roughly 300 on programme at any one time, talking of time, so they have a syndicate of about 11 training providers around the country. And the aim is to try and match a trainer assessor, so it's managed at an individual trainer assessor's home-based level. And by the way, we're talking work-based training here. Manage it so wherever they live, try and create a cohort of learners. Our goal is less than 50 miles from that training provider. So that means that we have somebody in Stoke, so we might go 50 miles around Stoke, but we might have another training provider coming down from Manchester who is sort of taking that cluster. So we're clustering, but we don't manage that. EDA Recruitment and Development do. And because they're not linked with any one training provider, they can match to the needs of the employer, because at the moment, if you engage with a training provider directly, you will get their story. Now that may not be a bad thing, but 100% of the time, that training provider may not be your best solution. So again, we need to take it, to create this operating entity to resolve that. This was the process which we've been through before. Effectively, pre-levy, the training providers hid the wiring. It was complex, but now we've sort of tipped out the wiring onto the table, and now the employers are looking at the wiring that the training providers hid. We've talked about the 4 areas of reform this morning: quality and frameworks, funding, buying training provision and contracting arrangements. But it's the employee and employer benefits of working through the ATA that I think are really key for my bit of today. I know that looks complicated, but that is what you as employers will be involved in when you are contracting for training as a levy payer. And a lot of employers don't want that task. It is involved, but the benefit is it does put you in charge. So we talked a little bit this morning that what funds can and can't be used for. Well, there's a bullet point list there: wages, travel, managerial costs, traineeships. You've got to focus the money into the training. Additional support. That hasn't come out so much this morning, but if you employ a 16 to 18-year-old, the government will give you, as employer, £1,000 back. Bonus payment, that's cash into you. And the training provider also gets 1,000, because the assumption is that an under 19-year-old, it's going to take longer to get through the programme, and there will be some additional support. Disadvantaged young people, English and math training, and additional learning support. Those are the headline numbers that are applicable. Prior qualifications, we've talked about that. So from May 2017, and this is a really superb flexibility that the government's put in place, that so long as it's substantive new skills, including higher levels, you can go in any direction, up, down, sideways. It's a fantastic opportunity. And we've talked about Trailblazers, so I'll pass on that. So, to remind you of the EDA apprenticeships growth, they achieved that growth with 3 level 2 qualifications. Trade counter, which is a new qualification which came out about 3 years ago, and that's roughly 80% of all delivery. Warehouse and customer service. And really, the trade counter has taken over from customer service. As training providers, we weren't keen on customer service because it's a very generic qualification. It's not really in-depth and great quality, but that was the only funded qualification we had. Trade counter for the merchant side, for the builders merchants, and the EDA was an ideal, and there is a new Trailblazer underway. But now, after the 1st of May, that is potentially what a training plan looks like for a merchant. And as you can see, it goes all the way up to degree level 6, and you've got all the areas: procurement, administration, sales and selling, information technology, management and leadership. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and a starter can come in at any level and they can migrate around that plan to develop their training. So it is a fantastic opportunity. In the furniture sector, we've got, these are the areas. So many of you, going back, many of you will be able to take advantage as employers, because some of those areas are common across all businesses, whether it's manufacturing or retail or warehousing or wholesaling. But in the furniture sector, we've got a whole range of new areas that are coming through on Trailblazers. They're fantastic, they're needed, but clearly they're quite specialist. Learner numbers are low, and unless training providers get reasonable numbers through, it's going to be difficult to deliver. So we actually do need a more cohesive approach, coordinated approach for training providers as well, so that perhaps we can specialise at Didac in one area and another training provider specialises in another area. So we do need to sort of help ourselves as training providers as well. What's happening now within the EDE model post 1st of May? The green ones are the new areas. So for the new qualifications, level up to level 6 and across to all the commercial areas, there's going to be an expanded syndicate of training providers. That's inevitable. You know, at Didac, we were sort of one of 11 focusing on level 2 and level 3. Well, we're not going to be going up 4, 5 and 6. That's just not what we do. That's the universities and the colleges are going to do that. Levy management and tracking. A lot of the organisations, some of the organisations we're working with have got levy pots of £750,000. That's a lot of management. And what the ATA team are doing is creating a data management system that can track that money, but more closely relate it to progress on apprentices. And that will be a fantastic tool for everybody, including the training providers, because these potentially are going to be big numbers. Sourcing and contracting, Chris or Mark mentioned about that. He's quite right. We've seen some draft contracts from our advisors, and they're 40-page contracts. Unbelievable. But that's the way it's going. So, and then claims. The ATA team or the managed apprenticeship team will handle the learner claims on your behalf and feed it back to employers. If a non-levy payer has to contract with a training provider with a ESFA budget, just like the old system. The issue there is that for many overall, the government have cut that budget by 80%. There is virtually no money. So inadvertently, what the government has done is they've precluded non-levy payers from accessing apprentice training right now. And it's going to be really tough. So to give you an example, at Didac, we've been cut by about 80%, well, I'll give you the numbers, it's easier. So we had a budget to deliver apprentice training in a given area, given age group, 600,000, tumbled through the doormat, 30,000. That represents about 6 woodworking furniture apprentices. So we cannot realistically offer the trade. So although the levy has come in and everybody's thinking, oh, this is how you spend it, the reality is, but for non-levy payers, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to find training. Now, the key thing about the ATA is the ATA is itself a levy payer. Therefore, if that apprentice is employed by the ATA can access any training provision so long as the training provider is on the approved list of training providers for the levy. So that means at one fell stroke, the EDA, because their ATA is a levy payer, business as usual. And that is pretty fundamental, because we cannot move forwards as an industry unless we solve that problem. Now, I think the government has to fix it, but the headlines in FE Week last week was pretty dire in that so many training providers are affected by that, and many will go out of business. That's mainly in the people subcontracting, and I'm not really aware of any furniture and woodworking provision in our sector being subcontracted. So that's the good news. But you know, survival of provision in our sector is probably a bit more tenuous than you might imagine. So it's a serious issue. This is just sort of summarising. The EDA skills model does create a focal point for a concerted collaborative effort across the electrical distribution sector. And that is an issue for the furniture industry. Connectivity. You know, employers didn't know where to go for apprenticeships or training provision, and that's still an issue today. But if with the EDA model, one call to EDA Skills Plus will create that connectivity because they know where to go for the provision. So we would have to replicate that as a sector, but at least we'd have a commercial entity which is doing that on a daily basis because they're trying to fulfil demand of apprentices into the furniture sector, so they have a darn good reason for going out to the sector to find that provision. So Trailblazers, again, I would say we can move on from that because the Trailblazers are addressing the shortcomings that some people are identifying in the current provision. I actually think as an industry we were pretty good at the quality of provision. When I look at it, compare it to what was available in the merchant sector, I didn't really feel that was very good, and so the new Trailblazers in the merchant sector are really upping the game. The Recruitment Service of EDA Plus does attract talent into the sector, so we need to do the same, and it is having an active recruitment agency which will attract talent into the sector. The retailers were more optimistic, or that was the findings of the report, and I felt that was probably because there was sort of a greater concentration of bigger companies. Trailblazing initiatives in the Northern Powerhouse. Well, we're based in Bristol, although we're a national provider, and actually that was quite true. We're quite unfamiliar with sort of what's going on in the north of England, and so there does need to be a coordinated approach, because if there is, then we as training providers can respond to that, but we do need a focal point. And I think it will be more difficult to do this with the specialist skills required in the furnishings industry. I go back to my list. It was relatively, for EDA, they had 3 qualifications in merchanting. It was quite easy. In our sector, it's much more tricky. But that's not a reason to put barriers up or draw the shutters up and not do it. So, Furnishing Industry Skills Forum. I'm number one signing the mandate to do it. I think we absolutely need it. We operate in the merchant sector on a skills forum. We operate in the timber and woodworking sector on a skills forum. It's led by employers. The training providers support it, but it's led by the employers, and I think it's absolutely vital. Furnishing Industry Skills Plus. Why not? Why shouldn't we create the same structure as the ATA with the recruitment so that it becomes an operating entity delivering a national strategy? Now, you might say, how the heck are we going to do that? Well, the EDA recruitment team have already rolled it out, their model, to the Builders Merchants Federation. From 2011 till the 30th of April, we had an exclusive supply relationship with the Builders Merchants Federation. We were their only training provider in the qualifications. We had good numbers going through the system. But when you look at the qualifications that are available to the sector, that was unsustainable. I was very uncomfortable with that. We had to find a proper solution. And this model was the proper solution. So I led the Apprenticeship Management Group into the Builders Merchants Federation, and they could immediately see the benefits that brought. And as of the 1st of May, they have got BMF Apprenticeships Plus. And we drop down the hierarchy. We become one of 11 or so syndicated training providers, and they will build on that. And they are absolutely going to expand their offer to offering degrees and a whole range of qualifications that we as a training provider can't touch, not interested in touching. It's not our expertise. So this is the last slide, and then I'll leave you alone. So the Apprenticeship Management Group sits at the top, and they have the central services, recruitment, payroll, levy, data management that I've talked about. And on the left, you've got EDA recruitment. And the crucial thing, I reiterate, is they have a payroll in excess of £3 million. The BMF Apprenticeship Plus is now alive and kicking, and I think they have the potential to add another 500 learners to that scale of things. The group ATA, on to the right, new ATAs. The Apprenticeship Management Group have got three new ATAs in the pipeline for approval, and they're rolling that out to other sectors. But one of those ATAs is going to be, if you like, a group ATA, and for small sectors and soft starts. So going back to the original question of my presentation, should the furniture industry establish an ATA? It is really, you don't have to do that yet. What you can do is you can go through a soft start using a group ATA, and then as it grows, and I would expect it to grow, then you might choose to segment it away and have your own ATA, and then the Furnishings Industry Skills Forum can then potentially participate in part ownership. It would have to be less than 51%, because under the group structure you have to maintain the payroll above 3 million. And then feeding into through the Skills Forum into the ATA, you can have the employers and you can have the trade associations. I would hope, and I'd like to think, as an industry we can come together and start being cohesive and driving it forwards. But if one or more trade associations says, actually we like the idea and we want to proceed, there's nothing to stop you going it alone. And the fact of the matter is you would just engage with the Apprenticeship Management Group, and their current services, recruitment, payroll, data management, they would all become available to you. So that's the model that the EDA have followed. I believe it forms a template for the furnishings industry, and if nothing else, I would like the SISF to consider that as a way forward.
Okay, thank you.